All right, let's jump right into this explainer with something we do all the time. Picture this. You stroll up to a machine on the corner, you slide your card in, punch in your PIN, and boom, out pop 3 crisp $20 bills. $60 in total. You know, we've all done it a million times. But have you ever actually stopped to think about the massive, hidden world that makes that totally mundane transaction happen? Like, here is the real mystery we're going to solve today. Who actually paid for those exact $20 bills? And honestly, who physically put them in that box before you got there? I promise you the answer is way more complicated than just saying, oh, the bank did it. Today, we're doing a full-on exploded view breakdown of the automated teller machine network. So here's our game plan. We'll look at the 3 operating lanes of an ATM, dive into the owner-operator model, see where the cash actually comes from, define who gets to touch the machine, break down the crazy math of refilling them, and finally, look at how the whole thing is defended. Okay, Section 1, the 3 lanes. Let's set up the overarching framework that governs literally every ATM transaction. Every single ATM transaction is actually 3 synchronized systems firing at the exact same time. Let's color code them to keep it simple. In amber, we have the physical cash lane. That's the real-world logistics of moving paper money around. In cyan, we have the transaction data lane. This is the network packets bouncing around to verify your PIN and check your balance. And then in off-white, the accounting and responsibility lane. This one dictates who takes on the liability, the risk, and importantly, who collects the fees. Every time you pull out that $60, all 3 of these lanes hit the gas. Moving on to Section 2, the owner-operator model. Let's dig into that off-white accounting lane first. Now, to figure out who actually owns the cash inside, you have to realize the answer changes depending on the specific ownership model. We're going to focus on one very common scenario outlined by US FinCEN guidelines, the non-bank owner-operator. Just to be clear, this is only one model, and it's totally different from those big fleets owned directly by traditional banks. In this setup, an independent business owner buys an ATM and stocks it using cash from their own bank account. So when you withdraw your $60, your bank debits your account, the machine hands you the cash, and the machine's owner gets electronically credited later, plus a sweet little fee for their trouble. But here's the catch, and it's a super important legal distinction. FinCEN specifically says this owner-operator is not a currency dealer or a money transmitter under the Bank Secrecy Act. You might be thinking, wait, why not? Well, it's because the ATM is really just acting like a communication terminal. It lets you access your own existing account. The machine dispenses funds that already belong to you, basically with your bank's blessing, and it can't send money to third parties. That precise legal distinction is exactly why you see these non-bank ATMs everywhere, from your corner bodega to your local dive bar. All right, Section 3, sourcing and moving cash. We know who owns it in our operator model, but where did the physical paper come from before it got shoved into an ATM cassette? So, jumping back into that warm amber lane. According to the Federal Reserve recirculation policy, banks are actually expected to supply what they call fit currency, basically bills that aren't torn or falling apart, straight from their own retail deposits before they go knocking on the Federal Reserve's door for more. In fact, if banks try to game the system by depositing all their cash and immediately ordering fresh bills in the exact same denomination in the same week, the Fed will hit them with what are called cross-shipping fees. So more than likely, those 320s you just withdrew came straight from a local store's deposit, got sorted to make sure they looked nice, and were shoved right back into the ATM network to dodge those fees. But, what happens when a bank does genuinely need fresh cash directly from the Fed, and suddenly, disaster strikes? Well, the Fed Cash Services Business Continuity Guidelines have some incredibly strict backup plans. If the main web ordering portals crash, the banks and armored carriers have to pivot instantly. We're talking old school fallback, emailing or literally faxing instructions. And those instructions are cross-referenced with extreme prejudice against an official authorization list. Think of it as a highly exclusive VIP list of people legally allowed to order millions in cash. Oh, and even in a complete emergency, they still have to order in exact standard denomination increments. No exceptions. During really severe disruptions, the logistics just go into absolute overdrive. The Federal Reserve might bypass the banks completely and just start calling the armored carriers directly. They can order those armored trucks to physically reroute incoming deposits to different Fed branches.
They can even kick off what's known as a stem run. Sounds intense, right? Well, a stem run is a massive, Federal Reserve-sponsored convoy that delivers cash orders directly to banks or carrier drop points. It is literally a heavily orchestrated ballet of rolling steel and armed guards, all to guarantee that the amber lane of physical cash never, ever stops flowing. Okay, moving on to Section 4, human roles. Speaking of armed guards, how exactly do we protect all this money when actual human hands need to service the machine?
Opening up an ATM is without a doubt its most vulnerable moment. Because of that, physical security relies on one foundational, absolutely crucial rule: strict separation of roles. You can't just have one person with a master key doing everything. The division of labor here is incredibly precise. You have cash in transit or CIT security guards. They are the only ones authorized to handle the actual money. They swap out the cash cassettes or bag the cash, and they are the ones who unlock the main safe door. On the flip side, you have the maintenance crew. They are explicitly forbidden from touching the money, period. They have to wait for the CIT guards or bank staff to crack the safe for them, and then they only tinker with the internal mechanical parts, like the banknote processing units. By keeping the mechanics totally separated from the cash replenishment, you cut off a massive avenue for internal theft.
Section 5, the math of replenishment. So we know who touches the money, but how do they know when to drive out there and exactly how much to load in? Let's talk about the crazy math behind this.
Deciding when to refill an ATM is a massively high-stakes balancing act. Think about it. On one hand, you've got stockouts. If the machine runs dry, you lose out on transaction fees and you tick off your customers. But on the other hand, a fully loaded ATM is essentially a metal box full of idle capital. It's money just sitting there in the dark, not earning interest, not being invested anywhere else. When you scale that opportunity cost across 10,000 machines, it is a staggeringly expensive problem. And here is where the math gets genuinely wild. Operations researchers have shown that the cost of refilling these things actually changes based on who is behind the wheel of the armored truck. If a bank just outsources the job to a third-party vendor, the costs are usually additive. You just pay a flat fee for every ATM they visit. Nice and simple. But if the bank runs its own in-house fleet, the costs turn into what mathematicians call a sub-modular function. What does that actually mean? Basically, because the truck is hitting multiple ATMs on a single optimized loop, the cost of adding one more ATM to that route drops significantly. It creates these massive economies of scale, but man, it turns scheduling into an absolute beast of a puzzle. To untangle this logistical nightmare and minimize both the empty machines and the idle cash, operations researchers rely on highly complex decision models. Calculating the single perfect route for hundreds of ATMs is almost computationally impossible, so they recommend a really smart shortcut known as the index policy. This scheduling trick dramatically outperforms standard benchmarks, and it ends up saving networks absolute fortunes in idle capital. All right, Section 6, defending the system. Let's slide back over to the crisp scion lane of data and look at how this whole crazy triad of cash, data, and accounting keeps the bad guys out. The FBI and the payment card industry, or PCI, demand some really rigorous defensive measures. A huge threat right now is something called ATM jackpotting. That's where cyber-physical attackers hook up malware or external hardware to literally force the machine to spit out every bill it has. To fight back, ATMs have built-in hardware security that triggers an automatic, total shutdown the second it detects specific malware indicators. And the security doesn't end when the machine gets old either. PCI guidelines require strict lifecycle management. Before an ATM, or even its spare parts, are thrown away, all the cryptographic keys and sensitive account data must be completely scrubbed and destroyed. Which brings us to our final section, and right back to your everyday experience. Now, what happens if that experience just breaks? Let's say the ATM glitches out. It doesn't give you your cash, but it definitely debits your bank account anyway. Well, in the US, under Regulation E, you've got some very practical consumer protections. You just notify your bank about the electronic fund transfer error, and they are legally required to investigate and fix it. So you are protected from losing your money to a rogue machine. So when you finally pull those three $20 bills out of the slot, that $60 is really just the visible tip of an immense, globally synchronized iceberg. It represents recirculated local deposits, dodging Federal Reserve cross-shipping fees. It's the product of FinCEN compliant owner-operators juggling their liability. It's computationally heavy submodular routing algorithms telling armored trucks exactly where to go, driven by CIT guards who aren't even allowed to talk to the maintenance crews, all shielded by malware hunting shutdown protocols. So, The next time you hear that mechanical whirring sound and grab your cash, just take 1 second to appreciate the sheer overwhelming operational gravity of what just happened. And it really makes you wonder, right? What other incredibly complex, totally invisible systems are quietly running just beneath our fingertips every single day? Keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.